Me and Resilience had a rough ride there for a while.
Welcome, Laura Sullivan, to our Beyond Resilience podcast with Carolyn and I. Laura, we've known each other for a while now, and it's been such a pleasure. We've had some very interesting conversations. So we're going to have another interesting conversation that today others will get a listen to, which is fantastic. You are an experienced leader of NGOs, from ActionAid to most recently We Move Europe, which is a huge campaigning organization calling for systems change and a better world. I know you're an eco-feminist, a fervent eco-feminist. What else would you like our listeners to know about you before we start our conversation?
Thanks very much for that lovely introduction, Angela. I guess I'd add that I'm an activist, and in this last year, I've been working as a facilitator, mostly with NGOs, and also as a moderator of public events, and having a load of fun with all of that. It's great to be here.
Takes you all around the world. I know you were recently in Brazil moderating and learning and training and working with people to facilitate change and conversations. It's fantastic working with you. Laurie, our conversation today is going to be about resilience, what's beyond resilience, the impact of resilience, and how we've been holding that in the world, what it costs, what it gets us. And we thought we'd start our conversation by asking you, if you reflect back over your life, right back to when you were young, resilience isn't a word that we actually used. Carolyn and I have discussed this. It's not a word that popped up in our conversations at home. You need to be more resilient. And yet we learned something about what resilience was. So I wonder if there's a story that you could tell about when you first realized you were resilient, or what resilience meant to your family, what you learned about it way back.
Yeah. You know what? I was thinking about this, and I tried to remember what's the first time I ever really thought about the word resilience. And a story came to mind, which I had completely forgotten. It's not way back. Hopefully it still counts. It's from 2012. And at the time, I was in my early 30s. I got this amazing opportunity to go and work with ActionAid Senegal in Dakar. And I was going off for 6 months, and I was so excited about it. And it was a really fantastic time. And I had a really weird couple of first days at work, because what the team, 30 fantastic people working with ActionAid Senegal, were doing was a workshop about a funding call from the European Commission on resilience. And resilience had just become the buzzword in the European Commission. And so they were really trying to figure out, how do we set up a program around resilience, and how do we define that? And actually, what they discovered during that workshop was the resilience is what they had been doing already for decades. What they'd really been doing was supporting local community organizers in many villages and towns across Senegal. And this is happening with ActionAid across the world, working with communities to really build the strength of the community and to build their own solutions to what's going on, not just at the local level, but also at the national, and really dealing with everything from that local to national to global levels. In a way, for me, it felt so strange that they had to really just redefine everything they were already doing and fit it into this word. And it made me a little bit cynical about that word to begin with, because it became part of our vocabulary in bullshit bingo. This was a big thing in NGOs in the sort of noughties and tens, where there were certain words: bang for your buck. God, what else is there? I'm trying to think. Return on investment. Anything from leveraging the private sector. And then resilience came along, and yeah, it didn't feel great. So me and resilience had a rough ride there for a while. And I think it's only more recently, and particularly since becoming part of different groups of really brilliant women leaders that are trying to find ways to cope, essentially, to bounce back when the inevitable difficult moments are thrown at you. And now I think me and resilience are getting on a lot better, and I've defined it in a completely different way for myself, but also for how we're doing that at community level and at global level. Yeah.
What is that definition for yourself now, and at community level and at global level?
Yeah. For myself, it's really practical. I have figured out some ways to try to, I'm not going to say I'm always resilient, right? I don't think it's a thing you can constantly be, but it's like a muscle that you work on. And for resilience, I have a daily practice, which I picked up from some brilliant podcast I can't remember the name of a very long time ago, which is called J Game. And J Game is an acronym that stands for these 5 things. So the J is journaling, the G of game is gratitude, the A is an act of kindness, the M is meditation, and the E is exercise. So I try to do all 5 of those every day, ideally in the morning, first thing when I get up. And I'm terrible at the E, at the exercise is pretty bad. All right, I'll stop being so hard on myself. But J Game has really, it sounds almost silly, but it's a practice that when I don't do it, I really notice, especially when I don't meditate. And I think that's the other thing, that even if they don't use the word resilience, a place called Plum Village, or rather a sort of a center for enlightened Buddhist activism or Buddhist enlightened activism, has really helped me an awful lot with meditation as a means of being resilient. And it took me a while to get into it, but I've really realized the power of that to just deal with what the Buddhists define as life, which is, it is suffering and it is joy. And just even being able to accept that and meditate with that, hold that thought, knowing that you're going to be facing these difficult moments and thinking about how you deal with that. Yeah, it's been a great gift, essentially. Yeah.
Mm.
So bouncing back with the help of tools and with the help of friends. Yeah.
So for you, it's gone from bullshit bingo to something more philosophical.
Yes. Great way of putting it. Yes.
Can I take us back to the bullshit bingo part of it? Because I thought that was really, it's interesting to know whether you are looking at that experience as 2 sides of coin. One, that resilience was something you're already doing, and it was very positive and very productive and very generative, is what I hear from you. But that for some reason, that just putting a kind of label from afar onto it denigrated that somehow. What was that tension that you saw?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So you remember that story, The Emperor's New Clothes? The emperor ends up wearing an outfit that is no outfit and he's naked. It felt a little bit like that. There was all of a sudden this new concept that came from the institutions, the European institutions. And it was, here's our new thing. You need to show us how you can put this into practice. But it showed that they didn't know anything about what they were already doing. The amazing programs, not projects, but programs that literally would work for decades, really, really being embedded in communities to support them to shine. And it really was generating true resilience. They just didn't really use that word, but there was an expectation of a sort of a use of a certain vocabulary. And for me, that was a waste of time. In a sense, it probably should have been the moment when we braved up and just said, look, we're doing it already. This is what it is. So yes, but you're absolutely right, Carolyn. Ultimately, there was something very positive there, which, hang on, we're already doing this. And it really is the essence of what is needed personally, but also at that community level. Because at that time in Senegal, the way it would work would be literally you'd have community organizers trained up to work with circles of people, particularly circles of women and to work with them over weeks and months and years, really to get them to be politically aware and active, essentially, by understanding that what was happening in the village was absolutely connected to what was happening in many villages and across the country and across the world, and that they weren't alone. And to really empower, in the true sense, many people to understand that they have this thing of agency and an ability to be active in the resilience of their own communities and go way beyond. And if I may add one thing, I'm at risk of going beyond your question. It was so wonderful to see there so many women that got involved, not just in local politics, but really went on to become leaders at the national level in Senegal. And it fills me with feelings of just warmth and hope in a time when we need a lot of hope. So thank you for bringing back that memory.
Yeah. Just coming back again, what it sounds like and what you do in your daily practices, it's a daily work that you do that's ongoing, that builds your resilience over time. It's not just a one and done. And what you're talking about doing with these villages is an ongoing piece of work over, as you said, weeks and months and years, that builds resilience over time, and it builds interconnection over time. Do you feel as though the definition that came down from the European Union at the time was you do it and it's done? Is it a tick box? Is there a feeling that in a way that we're also doing that individually as well? It's one person can do it and then you're resilient and you're done, as long as you tick all these boxes.
It did feel very tick the box. I'm pretty sure at the time, and my worst flaw is my memory, and that was 13 years ago. But there would have been a whole sort of set of log frames. There was at that time the log frameization. There still is, to a large extent, of the whole development work, which really fit things into boxes and ticking them. And that was essentially the problem, rather than just having a conversation to see, is there anything you're doing that does need adapting to help you to improve that sort of resilience. And I do feel, I have to say, before this call, I was like, I'm going to look up, how are different people defining resilience? And I saw a lot of, here's 5 ways you can become resilient. But then again, here I am with the J game, which in a way is my own 5 ways of doing it. And I think everyone's got to figure out their own one. And as you say, Carolyn, it's not something where, you do this and it's done. It's constant. And if I may add one thing to that, I realized that I need once every 6 months to plug in the soul batteries to some other soulful sisters. And what I find, and this is a massive privilege in my life, but that what I try to make happen is that I have some sort of retreat, or even if it's just a gathering with another group of excellent women who are dealing with loads of crap, and to sit together and listen and figure it out. And that is also part of this thing of, it has to be ongoing, because I feel that I'm at my strongest when I'm connected to others who are also dealing with the need to be resilient.
So I want to build on what you've both said as well. Really noticing again that this is ongoing. It's not a once and done. And when it's dictated by the bullshit bingo of the institutions or the organizations, it becomes this performatory tick box in practice. You said that you went back and you were looking at the definitions of resilience. And then I heard you say the hows. I've gone and looked at those too. There's this how to be more resilient. But what is resilience? You've spoken a lot about coping, dealing with the crap that's thrown at us. And that is very much the definition in general. Resilience is about bouncing back, overcoming. Is that how it was experienced also by the women when you were working in Senegal? Was resilience simply about dealing with wave after wave of what was coming at you, or was there something else? Is there something beyond this that we need to be looking at?
Yeah. what strikes me from your question, what comes to mind first is you've got to be able to find a balance, don't you, between it's not just coping with and dealing with everything that's thrown at you. You also need to be active in that stuff that's been thrown at you and be able to delineate between what's the stuff I can't control and what's the stuff I can. And certainly in that Senegalese story, and what was extremely strong in that whole work, which was called Reflect Circles. It came from Paulo Freire's thinking around empowerment of communities and around really what he called politicization of people, having them active in their own lives. It's not just dealing with it, it's dealing with it in a different way, which is knowing when you've got to fight to change things. And I think that is a part of it as well. The resilience makes you stronger in the fight to make life better, to change things for the better. So I think the bouncing back in itself has a purpose, which is to have the strength to go out there and go for it.
That sounds more like creating forward. That, and I'm putting my spin on this, I do each time. Partly because one of the reasons that we really wanted to have this conversation is it feels like the resilience conversation is also becoming reductive. It does limit us back to just dealing with what's coming at us. And I'm hearing you speak of something a little bit further than that, something that leads out and forward.
Yes, absolutely. To take it a little further, you mentioned at the start, Angela, that, you know, the organizations that I've worked with and for decades now, what I've been involved in and passionate about is systemic change, right? Is not just to accept the world the way it is, but really to acknowledge that the systems that we have were man-made and that they can be people remade, right? Even if you just look at the neoliberal economic system, the version of we have it of it now only goes back to the 70s, and it was designed primarily by men, and it can be completely redesigned, and actually it already is being redesigned by many of these resilient communities that are creating alternatives. So creating forwards, as you say it, in terms of, let's take it closer to home, let's take it to Europe, take it to a place like Italy, where you've got entire communities who are saying, we're going to be a pesticides-free community. Or you've got fearless cities, this incredible network of cities that's come together to look at the fact that fear does exist, but to question why it exists and to bring people together around recreating their cities, which is where most of the population lives now. Or if you go to Helsinki, where, you know, they've decided to really have zero homelessness or have no one on the street that doesn't want to be on the street. And one of the ways they've done that is by allowing people who are drug addicts to get a flat, because if they can't get a flat, they don't have an address and they can't get a job, and they are in an absolute vicious circle. There's this creativity and this like creating a new system in different ways exists already and is happening out there precisely because you have amazing, resilient communities that are acknowledging all the crap that's been thrown at them and are saying, do you know, what if we did it differently? And what if we could then, just by starting, inspire others to do this as well? And if you knit all those things together, then you really do have the alternative system. It's there. It's there in all of those efforts.
Is it a group of individuals that all of a sudden question the way they're working and how they can do it better? And what is the capacity there that we all could benefit from understanding more, that transition between just holding the fort versus doing something about it?
Oh, great question, Carolyn. Yeah, and I think the first word that comes to mind, words that come to mind are community building and community organizing. I don't know what the spark is that makes it happen from street to street, but I think literally it is about individuals that get together around what can often be a very small problem. I don't know, I'm looking out the window here, cars that drive too fast in their street, or a very simple problem, but then realize that there is strength in that community coming together, and then move on to the next thing, and then start to take the next step forward. And very often that happens organically, but that effort, I think, really needs more support. And particularly at this time, that what we need to acknowledge is that there's been a breakdown in that community organizing, particularly since COVID and lockdown, right? It wiped out so many efforts towards building something different. And it created a lot of fear and a lot of disconnection, and just maybe less of a natural culture of getting together. And every effort to get together, even if it's 4 people just trying to do something small, is worth it. And every invitation to bring your neighbors together is worth it. But I think we really need to get back to that. And what I am loving now, and what I'm trying to generate more of, is support for that community building and organizing effort, particularly here in Europe, not because Europe needs it more than any other region in the world, but because that's what I know best. And actually, what I've just said has an element of truth in it. I do think Europe needs it at least as much as any other region in the world, because we don't necessarily have as strong a culture as, for example, in the US, of this really community organizing towards change. So yeah, I think that's the secret, or that's at least one of the most important elements in getting from just coping into creating and shaping the future.
We can't do it alone.
Yeah. But I was wondering, you've mentioned fear and that the kind of lack of a muscle in terms of just building community, getting together. I've also thought that there's an issue around people lacking agency these days. Do you find that as well? Is that something that you know how to cope with or build in individuals or in communities?
Yeah, I think your gut feeling is right. I think the agency is always there, but the awareness of the agency is not. And I think part of that is because there is such a glut of darkness through the news, right? Mainstream news, it is so profoundly negative all the time, or rather, it's training the camera on the worst things that are happening, because that's what brings the headlines, brings the numbers, etc. But what we're not seeing is all of the incredible, creative, different stuff going on all around the world. I started watching kids' news with our kids, because the kids' news in Flanders is called Ketnet, and it's 8 to 10 minutes of very balanced viewing, because they show, look, there was a peace accord in Gaza, but yesterday that changed, and they explain what's going on in a really brilliant and simple way. They also talk about these kids in this other community that are doing this brilliant thing. And so what the kids get to see, what we also get to see, is there are great things happening at the same time. And I feel that agency and awareness around agency, and that sort of will to just get up off the couch and do something, it gets suffocated by the darkness. And what people really need is a sense of hope, and a sense, not fake hope, but really that sort of Rebecca Solnit inspired hope in the dark. It's the hope that is in the uncertainty, that we don't know what's going to happen. And it's always there, but there isn't enough of it on this planet right now. And I think that's where we all have a responsibility to go out there and not create fake hope, but tell the stories of what is bringing us hope. In fact, you two as interviewers are very skilled at this already, but so much of what we need to do is about asking the right questions. And I think one of the most powerful questions is, what's giving you hope right now? Because there's always something. but it's often there in the back of our heads and we don't bring it out and we don't share it with others, which then kills that sort of sense of there is hope in my getting out there and just doing something, even if it's just contacting a lonely neighbor down the street.
It's a really profound statement, Laura. And the word that keeps coming to mind for me, and that's we're working on our definitions with Carolyn, is that all of this darkness and the way that the news is portrayed and only negative creates a form of resignation, a sense of powerlessness. I can't do anything. It's too big for me. And with the disconnection that comes from that's come after COVID, like you're saying, then that it's like a negative spiral of I'm alone and what's the point? Rather than we're interdependent, we work together, and what is giving us hope? And so really hearing you speak about these, you've spoken about several initiatives, many in fact, in our conversation today that already I noticed uplifted you when you were speaking. Carolyn, it put a smile on her face. It lifted me up. It gave a sense of just coming back to repeating, where do you have hope? Where can you see hope? What else is possible? What would you love in your community? What do you notice is going well? Overcoming that resignation with some powerful questions. I wanted to ask you two questions, in fact. One is, where do you see hope then? If that's a practice for you, what answers are you coming up with? That's the first question.
Yeah, great. One of the greatest sources of hope that I have is in the massive efforts. I'm bringing it back to Plum Village. I'm bringing it back to that gorgeous place in the south of France, where many years ago, Thich Nhat Hanh, who was a Buddhist monk, set up this center as part of his efforts initially to try and stop the Vietnam War. He and others were trying through non-violent means to convince the US and other world powers at the time that it made no sense to destroy and kill millions of people. And what they have done ever since, these are people who, he and others like him, were dealing with the worst kind of trauma you can imagine. And they have set up this center, which gives me tremendous hope. I got the massive privilege to go there last April for a week, and it has changed my life, and it does give me hope. And it is not something that is necessarily accessible for absolutely everyone to go to. What I would say is this: what they are doing is allowing people to really experience joy and to allow themselves to experience suffering as well. And so to embrace life, but also not, they're really well beyond what is one, I think, valid critique of the whole world of mindfulness and meditation, which is there's a danger this just takes you off on your own individualist path. There is one, but what they're doing is explicitly bringing you beyond your own zone. They really do say you must start. It starts with you. But they really are promoting a kind of activism that gets beyond the great intense fear there is right now around everything from climate change, right? The sort of fear that is paralyzing activists who feel that it's too late already, to say it's not too late. You must do everything you can now, just lose the anxiety. In fact, that's one of my favorite things that I've ever heard any of them say. But this group of people are really channeling non-violent activism, ways to do that, ways to get yourself into what they call sanghas, which is a word for a community of support. I am in an alumni sangha, a group with people from Plum Village, where we meet every 3 months and we support each other by sharing some of the load. And so the fact that exists, and the fact that already I don't know what the numbers are, but absolute masses of people have either gone there or done their online courses. Incidentally, I have never come across an online setting where I've felt people channel so much spirituality and so much insight and depth online as the Plum Village courses. And it really has helped me and many other people like me to say, you can't give up hope. We really must keep going. And how you do that is by stopping and breathing. That's the first line. So hope, maybe, Angela, is in stopping and breathing. And through that breath, getting insight and really thinking about what's actually happening on this planet and what do I want my legacy to be? Because your legacy ultimately is your actions, right? That's it.
Hope, and it sounds like community. Hope and community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. I don't they say, oh, get yourself in as many sanghas as you can. And again, I realize it's not easy, right? It is a privilege to be part of a community. But even if that's two friends where you just share more than how the weather is and how you're doing on that day, not that those are invalid questions, but that you really develop the muscle of being able to share what's getting you down, but also and ask for help, but also give a little back. I think that is what's going to get us through. And I really wish that for everyone out there to have that community, however small it is.
And what's the role of dreaming? I'm going off on a slightly different tangent, but I notice it's sort of absent in the conversation for the moment. I'm curious.
Oh, I love it. We're so into, go back to the log frames and the planning and the KPIs. And what we really should be doing is at least finding the balance between dreaming and planning, and dreaming first. There's again this sort of feeling like everything's a mess. There's nothing we can do. We're blocked. They're too powerful. We can't shift it. And that's rubbish. A big part of that is the loss of the ability to dream. And was reading yesterday in this wonderful book, Emergent Strategy, about the ability to develop this idea of, what's it called? Adaptive, what was it again? Oh God. It's the concept that you have your vision and you have your dream, and no matter what, you keep pursuing that. But of course, things will change in the world, so you have to adapt. But you still are on course towards this dream. And I think that the more we see the headlines of all the bad stuff happening out there in the world, the more we feel small and unable to make a change there. But you must hold on to your dreams regardless, and yeah, maybe adapt them to try to help sort out some of the malaise that is out there. But that combination of dreams and community to make those dreams a reality is what changes things. And it might sound very up in the clouds, but it is history. It's what has always happened. It's people who've had dreams or visions or whatever you want to call them that have brought about all the change, and very rarely alone, but in those communities of people that just go for it, that just know that something else is possible, is always possible.
I feel filled with hope.
The dream is what gives people motivation to take the first step, which is wonderful. And then the key here is not having to feel like you've got it right. It's very easy, especially for women, to think, I don't have it all planned out. I don't know how it's going to work. I don't know what we're going to be doing, so therefore I won't take my first step. And how do you get people to think beyond that? What is the first thing you need to tell people when they're thinking, I don't know exactly how this is going to turn out, so I'm not going to do it?
Yeah. Oh, goodness me. Carolyn, you just transport me back to a room. Again, this is an experience with ActionAid when I remember the wonderful Everjoyce Wynne, who recently passed away, set up this feminist leadership program inside ActionAid for women working in ActionAid. And I remember being in South Africa in a room with about 20 women who were asked at the beginning, do you feel powerful? If yes, put your hand up. And there was like a few half hands, and then maybe there was one like, woohoo. But the rest of us, myself included, were like, no, I'm not powerful. And we went through 3 days together of a load of different sort of gems of exercises that were aimed at trying to manage the radio nonstop that is so particularly strong within the heads of women, right? The radio nonstop that says, I'm rubbish, I'm crap, I can't do this, I don't know how. And it was like therapy for the radio nonstop of negativity. And by the end of it, after running through one of the exercises was brilliant. It was one, they asked us to write down all the problems there were internally to ActionAid. And I remember a flip chart where there were maybe about 337 different colored Post-its with problems. And then they asked us to do a root cause analysis and a systemic analysis. And we really brought it down to just 3 things at that time. I remember it was about identity, it was about decision making, it was about communication. And when we'd done that job, we were like, yes, we figured it out. We sorted out the whole organization. I don't know about that, but at least we had some very good theories. And at the end of that workshop, sorry, long way around in the story, but they asked us again, who feels powerful? Every hand was straight up there. And we just walked out that door with sort of a gust of energy. And so many of those women have gone on to do powerful and amazing things. And yeah, you need help to get there. I guess what I'm saying in all of this is I may have, a much worse case of the radio nonstop of negativity were it not for powerful and generous women that shared this knowledge and this experience, and I stand on their shoulders today.
Laura, I'm really hearing, like in the beginning, we were talking about resilience as being something as, first of all, it's about coping, and then realizing that we were resilient and that we could cope, and then realizing that there was something more to it, actually, that together with a dream, with some help to move away to get rid of the radio nonstop of negative thoughts, with a sangha, with the right people around us. In fact, I was watching you make movement. So for those who aren't going to see the video of this, you had quite a fluid movement when you were talking about emergence and moving towards that dream. And I know that you are really creative. I was actually going to ask you about a song, but I'm more curious about if you had a metaphor for how you might have seen resilience at the beginning of our conversation. And then given that movement that you had, that you were making towards the end before, what would the original metaphor for resilience be? And how might you see it shifting? What would a new one be?
Yeah. I know how I'm seeing it now, and I'm seeing it as a candle. And when the wind blows, the candle flame flickers and might die down a bit, but it can spark right up again. And yeah, I think that's how I'm seeing it. And that there are conditions that help the candle to just really have this bright flame throughout. And for me, I do want to link it to a song because I did think about it before, and I think constantly in songs, and I have to stop myself. But as soon as I saw you want to talk about resilience, I heard just get by with a little help from my friends was immediately the one in my head. Yeah, Beatles are there with us.
So Laura is part of this fantastic group called Toy Division, and she sings in Brussels, and it is the most awesome music, and they rewrite all of the songs to some well-known music. So I was curious as to what your song would be, and you just sang it beautifully. Yeah, very much the community and get by with a little help from my friends. Oh.
As soon as I think of resilience, I know that so much is in yourself and about keeping yourself well. But in a way, it's a circle, isn't it? And I think it really is the friends, the sangha, the community, the ones that care around you, that really help you to go for it and encourage you to stay strong. My strongest moments is when I'm surrounded by others who feel.
And in a world that's so much about the self-made man, and it is great to have autonomy and feel like you can do something, that you have agency. Really hearing in the conversation, though, that we have to drop this idea about that there's more validation in being able to do it by yourself. And in fact, the strongest moments are when you're doing it together. There seems to have been a theme in our conversation.
Absolutely. I have believed that for a very long time now. And it doesn't have to mean 1 million people on the streets. And what it could be is just connecting the dots of what already exists. When I look at power in Europe now, and look at so many of the different movements, for example, the feminist movements, look at the movements of women in Ireland, in Spain, in Poland, and way beyond, that are every day are showing their resilience, but are also bringing about powerful change. So many, you can hear it from the accent. I'm from Ireland, and so many of the massive social changes that I never thought would be possible in my lifetime have been possible because so many women got out and fought for it. And that has been happening for decades, but it's become louder and stronger and more unapologetic over time. And that gives me so much hope. I could cry. In fact, I feel a little bit emotional talking about it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
I love
you.
the word unapologetic. Unapologetic. Really important for our moving forward.
It really is. And there's so much in it. I think Irish women wouldn't be the only ones who felt for so long that they needed to apologize for the way they were. There's so much shame. And I think we're bursting out of that fog of shame. And it's a powerful thing.
Laura, that sounds like an amazing place to bring our conversation to a close. The hope, the bursting out of the cloud of shame, the recognizing that we're not alone. And I don't want to put words into your mouth. What's something final that you might like to say to close this conversation about bursting through this cloud, finding hope, creating the sangas around you?
Yeah, it's always out there. You just got to go and look for it and just find those people in your community that are up for it, whatever it is, even if it's just a dance or a song, but that could lead to something more. Just maybe carve out 1 hour in your week just to connect with others and think about something you might want to do. That's going for it. Maybe to finish, I realized when I did this online course with Plum Village called Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet, that there were so many people who said, oh, I'm not sure I should be here because I'm not an activist. And then I was like, what's their definition of activist? But activism and action is just that. It doesn't have to be that you're constantly on the street with a placard and a demonstration, but it's just that you care enough to just try that one thing, just one thing. So just go for it.
You just made me cry.
Oh, no.
Yep. So inspired. I think that's an inspiring conversation. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Absolutely loved your questions. Thank you so much.
Laura, if people wanted to find you, to speak more about this, maybe join in some action and activism with you, come and see you at Toy Division, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah. You'll find me on LinkedIn. My full name is Laura Sullivan. You'll also find me on Instagram. Either of those would be great.
Hi, Angela. How are you doing today?
Oh, hi, Carolyn. I'm full of beans because I got my training in. Always full of beans with a proper sports routine. What about you?
Yes, well, I did too. You might even be able to see my rings around my eyes from my swim just an hour ago. But we did have a chance, didn't we, to listen to Laura Sullivan again, and we wanted to give some of our thoughts to our listeners. What did you think, Angela, of Laura's fantastic conversation with us? I was quite inspired.
I was very inspired as well, Carolyn. I guess it links back to what you and I have both just said. Laura has in place for herself a J game, journaling, gratitude, active hope, meditation, and exercise. So a real structure of support for herself. That's something already that we can all take away, that this is not an indulgence, that it's a necessity and a leadership responsibility given the times that we're in. We were just discussing that ourselves, the importance of sticking to these amazing goals that we've set for ourselves, but also putting in place the structures that allow us to fulfill on those goals. And that being key to not only our resilience and being able to deal with whatever life throws at us, but really create what's beyond resilience. What about you?
Well, I've always understood the basics, but just since we spoke with Laura, I've been practicing the J games very deliberately every day. And I've really found a difference, even in a couple of weeks. I do it first thing in the morning. It settles me down. I feel those butterflies I get in my stomach when I think, oh, can I get everything done today that I need to get done? Or what's really important for me today? It just goes away because I feel much more grounded, much more centered, much more grateful for what I have. And it works. So, especially journaling. I didn't really think about it. I used to love journaling. I started it again. I do it 1 page. So nothing big, and it's just wonderful. I highly recommend it. I know everybody's listened to it and thought, oh, that sounds like an interesting idea. No, do it. It's
Yeah.
great.
It's like everything, right? The idea is always like, oh yeah, I'll get around to it. But it's only in the practice that you get the benefit of anything. And I know anyone out there who has children or nieces or nephews, we have that conversation with the kids. It's like, but you have to do it. I've always journaled. It's a really important practice for me because I have thoughts that ping pong all the time, all over the place. And it's actually my way of coming back to center and discerning which of the thoughts I really need to give my attention to and which I can discard completely when all the time they all feel important. And so I have taken on, in particular, though, the journaling practice that goes with The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And it's actually 3 pages. And so just ramping up that, the 1 page is fantastic. And I notice how edgy I get getting towards, like, going from 1 page to page 2, and how I want to let it go and tell myself I've done enough. And that is enough, in all honesty. So for anyone out there who wants to try journaling, have to make yourself do more. But it's my practice to go a little further as well. Where I find that leads me in this resilience practice is all of a sudden I go from getting my thoughts down on paper and just more discernment to high creativity. All of a sudden, even better ideas come out by sort of, I have to admit, almost forcing myself, like requiring myself to keep going the extra mile. So Laura's J game has reinforced that in me, the necessity of that.
And what else did you pick up? Because there's so much more richness in that conversation.
I really loved how she started talking about, and the corporate or the organization says we should be doing this, this, and this about resilience. She's working in Africa, for goodness sake, where who needs to give Africa lessons on resilience? And exactly that. She comes out going, hang on, what is this bullshit bingo? This is exactly what we've been doing. So recognizing that resilience is probably, if you have a bit of a look into it, what you're really good at already. But I think she had some extra recipes for the going beyond that I know you were really struck with, because it linked back to Katie's conversation, if I remember rightly.
Well, yeah, it struck me afterward that synergy between the conversation with Katie Rulin and The Empathy Fix, her book, and what Laura was talking about, because Katie was saying really that this poverty trap, where these people are resilient already. They're able to cope with so much more than we thought. And yet we're not allowing them to get beyond that. And I think Laura was saying, well, actually they had a practice of sitting and listening to people and reflecting on what's going on and empowering people through that reflecting and realizing and then respond process. It sounded very similar to what they were doing in Senegal. And she managed to get all these women at a local level to really step up into the regional and the national level as a result of that. And here they're saying, well, you might be more resilient. Well, actually, no, you have to be doing more than being resilient. You have to change the system. And that's what they were doing. Let's do something different. Let's not just keep gritting our teeth.
Yeah. And not always defining ourselves with the next hurdle or obstacle to overcome, or how strong we are at simply coping with the next round of punches. One thing that Laura brought up, which has come out also in many of our conversations, is cultivating hope and the vision, like dreaming, allowing time to dream. And that's what takes us beyond just dealing with the next thing, actually having a vision to focus on and lean into, a vision of thriving and cultivating that hope through action in terms of getting there.
Yeah, she was able to draw a bit of a process path for anybody out there who's trying to work out how you do this, trying to pull that vision together and then becoming aware of your own agency in order to build even a small community of 2 or 3. And then from there, that's where community organizing comes. So understanding that path of really getting that vision, being able to see the power that you have to put that into place just by talking to people and then build from there. It's amazing.
Yeah. So that was an awesome conversation. And to link back as well, there's individual vision and then there's collective visioning, which is a really powerful process. So when you do get 2 or 3 people together, you can either put together your individual visions and see where they're similar, or you can really do some collective visioning together and see what comes out of that. So you don't have to do it all on your own. There's individual agency and power in the collectivity again. Yeah. So that was a powerful, powerful conversation. And we hope you get a lot out of it and that you will start on your own individual personal processes of working on your J game and maybe get back to us a little bit with how that goes for you.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of the World Beyond Resilience podcast.
If anything you heard today sparked an aha moment or made you think differently about resilience, please tell us about it in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.
And please share it with everyone you know.
For more episodes exploring how we can thrive beyond just bouncing back, follow our show on your favorite platforms.
And of course, we have additional resources and deeper dives into all the topics we discuss on our website, which is worldbeyondresilience.com.
So we absolutely love this topic, and we can see the possibility for this to create really powerful, vibrant, prosperous change in organizations and systems. So if this conversation interests you and you start to feel that spark as well, and you think it would be useful for yourself or within your organization, feel free to get in contact. So until next time, remember, there's a whole world of possibilities beyond just being resilient. Take care.